Hello and welcome to The Entrepreneurs on Monocle Radio, the show all about inspiring people, innovative companies and fresh ideas in global business. Today's show is all about fashion, from a heritage brand celebrating a significant anniversary to a fresh take on what's next for the sector. First, we'll explore the importance of maintaining brand identity while evolving, with the CEO of a renowned Italian menswear label.
You must reinvent yourself in order to address the ever-evolving needs of so many different customers worldwide.
And I'll be joined by Monocle's fashion director, Natalie Theodosi, for a fashion forecast.
There's a lot of industry change, which will change what we see on the catwalk and what the designers propose we wear, but also behind the scenes how these businesses are run.
This is The Entrepreneurs, with me, Tom Edwards. You're listening to The Entrepreneurs. Stefano Canali is the CEO of the Canali Group, a family-owned luxury menswear brand founded in 1934 and renowned for its impeccable Italian craftsmanship. As a third-generation leader of the company, Stefano's been at the forefront of preserving its rich heritage while steering the brand towards a more sustainable future. This year, Canali celebrates its 90th anniversary, and to mark the occasion, I caught up with Stefano to hear more about his plans. He began by telling me about the founding values of the company and how they've shaped Canali over the years.
Well, the company was established 90 years ago out of a necessity. So my grandfather and his brother decided to team up in order to pursue a very interesting project that was to set up a workshop able to make and manufacture a piece of garment very important back then. It was a suit. Eventually, suit kept on being very important for everybody in the following 90 years, as it is today, as a matter of fact. So they infused into this initiative of theirs two basic and founding principles. It was respect and responsibility, which turned out to be the very important, inspiring principles that the Canali family acted on a daily basis in the following years and infused into the company, making sure that everybody working for the company acted the same way as a consequence of that.
I find it so striking, these values, and how seemingly relatively easily the business and those leading it have been able to keep them front and centre. If we talk about some of these things, responsibility, integrity, they're quite abstract. I presume it hasn't been easy, and it requires a really engaged leadership structure and a really passionate degree of education, if you like, certainly with new joiners to the business, to try and communicate those values. Is it difficult, or actually is it so baked into the DNA, if you like, that people can almost feel that, Stefano, as soon as they walk through the doors?
I believe that these principles are very much appreciated by everybody these days because they are principles that allow people to do the right thing towards both the planet and the people themselves. If I have to make an example of what these principles mean for Canali, as far as people are concerned, for instance, showing respect and responsibility means that when you run a company and you develop a business, you have always quite clear the fact that from an ethical standpoint, from a substantial standpoint, you have to act in a very right way, no matter who you're dealing with, no matter whether you're talking to and you're dealing with suppliers, no matter whether you're talking to banks, no matter whether you're talking to final consumers, and most importantly, whenever you deal with people working for you and the community these people belong to. So showing respect and responsibility means that, for instance, as far as the knowledge of our artisans is concerned, you are supposed to make sure that this knowledge is transferred from one generation to another and is, at the end of the day, a wealth that is shared with the community you work with. And as far as the final consumer is concerned, showing respect and responsibility means that whatever you propose to your final consumer is supposed to be high quality, as far as both the fabric and the construction is concerned, because by providing your final consumer with a high quality product, you make sure that this product will last longer than expected to some extent, And eventually you are able to make sure that your final consumer is investing his own money in something that is worth the money that is spent.
Well, that's interesting. Do you think sometimes when we talk about sustainability and longevity, maybe we focus too much just on materials and supply chains, and maybe we don't spend enough time talking about exactly that, quality, making things to last? Okay, maybe charging a premium for them, but that's what real sustainability means, is crafting something with that kind of purpose, the intentionality you've described, Stefano. That's surely almost as important as where you source your fabrics and your materials and your component parts, right?
Yeah, you're definitely right. And when we refer to environmental footprint, we do refer to the footprint made by the whole organization run by Canali. And that's the reason why, in a very consistent way, as far as our values are concerned, we decided to measure what our environmental footprint was through a methodology that belongs to the life cycle assessment family, a methodology developed by the European Union called Organization Environmental Footprint that allowed us to measure the impact of our doing business from the sheep up to the moment we sell the final product to the final consumer, according to 16 indicators, among which we have carbon footprint, ecotoxicity, land usage, and so forth. And by performing these measurements and by adding the product environmental footprint to the OEF we mentioned before, we ended up with a very interesting conclusion that is very much linked to the longevity you mentioned before. By making and proposing high quality products made out of high quality fabric and constructing the sartorial way, we end up proposing something that lasts longer, at the end of the day is more sustainable. And it's very important as far as even the concept Made in Italy is concerned. As you know, Made in Italy is a synonym for something qualitative, something very much linked to the Italian lifestyle and Italian beauty. By performing these measurements, we also concluded that the way Canali makes things in Italy is very much sustainable. As far as the planet is concerned, according to the results of the OEF and PF measurements, and also as far as people are concerned, because by making sure that whatever is proposed by Canali is actually made in Italy, and it's always been so for 90 years by now, we also managed to make sure that people working for us in Italy benefit full protection as far as social security, the health insurance, and the legal issues are concerned. So by staying in Italy, we managed to be fully sustainable as far as people and planet are concerned.
Exactly, and an admirable one it is indeed, Stefano. You mentioned Made in Italy. Let's talk a bit about that brand. How do you gauge where we are at the moment? You know, you have an interesting experience, as you say, your family heritage. You've worked and led the brand for a long time, but you worked in the US, of course. You worked in finance before. How does Brand Italy, how's it playing on the global stage? There are some interesting challenges at home and abroad, political in character and so forth. But, you know, we're very interested in soft power, obviously. I think, as you are probably aware here at Monocle. Brand Italy, give me the 2024 standings.
Made in Italy is, I would say, a very effective way to summarize what Italy stands for as far as a cultural taste and likes are concerned. So I'm asked this question many times, and whenever I think about the inner beauty of Made in Italy, I always refer to whatever surrounds us. So for a person not living in Italy, it is very important to understand that by spending time in like your hometown, by visiting important cities in Italy, but even small villages in Italy, you definitely happen to be surrounded by art, by masterpieces. That is, again, the result of different layers of cross-contamination that occurred over the past centuries. And this ongoing inspiration is what is eventually distilled into a made in Italy product, no matter whether it's a piece of garment or a cuisine recipe or a modern piece of art. So it's very important to understand that Italy as a country is a very important source of inspiration, an ongoing inspiration. And as a matter of fact, is very much appreciated by everyone living in every single country outside Italy.
Well, yeah, and I was going to ask you a little bit about retail, because obviously I could take a 10-minute walk from our offices here in Marylebone, and I could be on New Bond Street, I could be outside one of your flagship stores. Talk to me a little bit about the boutiques, Stefano, and how they communicate not just that made in Italy value that you've described so elegantly there, but the brand value, because it's very interesting. You have your kind of, I don't quite know how to phrase it, with Canali Labs, you have a kind of school almost that helps to teach and inculcate these values in your staff, right? Tell me a bit about how the role that bricks and mortar retail play in this whole experience.
The physical stores will always play a very important role in dealing with the final consumer. We experienced the importance of online store during the pandemic, but as a matter of fact, for a luxury brand, it is very important to have a retail store, a physical store, keeping in mind that the online operations will be a very effective complement to the experience that can only be delivered in a physical store. So the Canali Lab you mentioned is our way to educate our sales assistants and salespeople in order to properly and effectively deal with a final consumer. The retail store is already and is going to be a place where Canali will be able to make sure that the consumer will have a full and full-fledged experience of the whole brand, in addition to the chance for the final consumer to try on any piece of garment proposed by a physical store and exchange comments and seek advice from the salespeople. For instance, and unfortunately is not something that has been executed in London for different constraints, we are working a lot in expanding and enhancing the experience we deliver to our consumers. For instance, in China, we opened up the very first execution of the Canali Cafe project. As a matter of fact, it's not a cafe, it's a bistro, it's a place where you can feel and experience the same values of Canali that you already have a chance to experience when you try on a piece of garment made by Canali. So a place that is conceived by the same architects that conceived the concept of our store. It's a place where you can taste Italian coffee ground by Italian coffee grinding machines, brewed by Italian coffee machines. It's a place where you can have a taste of Italian recipes. It's a place where you can seamlessly keep on experiencing Canali, moving from the store to the cafe itself. So it's something that for a luxury brand is even more important over time, because we know that for a customer to be fully engaged, it is very important to go beyond the boundaries, the usual boundaries that normally are linked to the product itself. So if you want to experience Canali, you have a chance to get a sip of Canali both from the store and from the cafe itself. If we move to Milan, which is the latest execution of our brand new store concept, we managed to further enhance this experience goal by creating a very important lounge for customers of ours with the one-of-a-kind addition of a private garden, which is totally unexpected in a store placed in the city center of Milan. So by providing the very important VIP lounge and this private garden to our final consumers in Milan, we managed to have a very interesting leisure time with these customers of ours, during which we can have and hold a nice conversation, spanning from details about the products or moving on to details around the brand's plans for the upcoming future. So it's something that at the end of the day strengthens the relationship with the customer.
And I think that's so smart, Stefano, isn't it? It's this pivot into the experiential. You talk about it as a leisure experience. We're seeing that across the piece throughout luxury and key markets. It's so essential that consumers feel that different kind, a level of engagement. And these expressions of it, I think, are really interesting. You mentioned China there a little bit. Let's zoom out even further if we can. We keep zooming. Let's look at the big strategic vision. Big picture, Stefano. How do you marshal the brand? This is in your in-tray, right? It's a tough assignment, a hugely complex, ever-changing global market with all kinds of different dynamics, lots of different volatility acting on it. I mean, we've seen that through the pandemic and beyond, and states of conflict in various places. How on earth does Stefano Canali ensure that you've got your hands on the right levers and that you have a global strategy that you can stick to with all of those attendant pressures? It's presumably quite a challenge.
Well, I believe that nowadays it is of paramount importance to be trustworthy and be credible in front of every single customer you deal with, no matter where this customer comes from. By saying so, I'm just claiming the fact that you must be true to yourself. So your identity must be preserved over time. At the same time, you must reinvent yourself in order to address the ever-evolving needs of so many different customers worldwide. So at the end of the day, the most difficult task to accomplish is to reinvent yourself while staying true to yourself. And we can perform so and can do so by keeping in mind what our founding values are as far as our DNA is concerned. So besides respect and responsibility, Canali has always been known for, making high quality sartorial suits. So the high quality of the fabrics used and the high quality of craftsmanship are, for instance, the values that must be executed in every single products we make, no matter the product category they belong to. But at the same time, of course, we must evolve according to the evolution of the needs out there. And, this is a task that we have already addressed, and I'm sure that we are we're achieving the goal we set with a high degree of success.
Stefano, let's return to kind of where we started. I asked you about the heritage of the brand, this amazing tradition story, and I wanted to ask you about marrying up that heritage, those values that have sustained, as you said, for 90 years. And of course, last month, there was some different events. I think very humbly, but very interestingly, the business marked that milestone. And it was interesting. You chose as the expression of that exactly this mix of innovation, cutting-edge technology, artistic expression, but that reflected on and maybe riffed a little bit on those values, took them for a bit of a walk, to use the jazz parlance. Tell me about how you and the rest of the team decided to mark that occasion, because I think it's really interesting.
Well, we decided to team up with students of NABA, which is Nuova Accademia delle Belle Arti from Milan. And as I said before, we asked them to come up with an outcome that was at the same time analogical and digital. And there was, at the end of the day, a very clear goal to create a link between the word of the past, which is still the word we live in, and the future. The word of the past being a physical interpretation of Canali through the lens and the sensibility of youngster in their 20-something. And in addition to that, we also asked them to create something that was fully digital, created through the artificial intelligence tools available out there. And the results were very interesting and compelling, because we managed to see one next to the other the two words, united and two words sharing the same values. So different interpretations of 90 years of history of Canali. And it's a very good experiment that we will pursue in the other executions of the celebrations of the 90th anniversary that will take place in United States, China and India in the upcoming months. And so we also decided to strengthen our relationship with arts ever since the new strategy, the evolutionary strategy of Canali was finally executed after the pandemic was over. And as a matter of fact, if you happen to visit our stores in Madison Avenue, for instance, in New York City, or in Milan, or even in Mumbai at Geo World Plaza, you will find some pieces of art expressly made by local artists in order to seal and highlight and emphasize the relationship between the arts of these artists and the art that is embedded in the products made by Canali. At the end of the day, the execution of every single phase of construction, every single manufacturing phase within our factories in Italy are a piece of art. If you have a chance to look at every single activity made by artisans, you will soon realize that behind these activities and manufacturing process, there is a lot of knowledge that was evolved, that was accrued, that was layered over the past 90 years. So there is this strong bond between the art embedded in our products and the art available out there. And this is a message we want to deliver to our final consumers. And again, it's an experience we want to share with our final consumers, of course, in our physical stores.
And Stefano, maybe just a last thought. Let's talk about products. Let's talk about collections. I've been browsing through some of the Spring/Summer 25. So many of the key, I guess, Canali sort of signatures, texturally, color palettes, the beautiful craft in the tailoring. This kind of, I don't know what you'd call it, almost sort of weightlessness almost, which is, I hope you'd agree, maybe one of the signatures in some of the tailoring style. Talk to me a bit about how all of the things we've discussed, all of these different values, how they manifest each season in the collection, because that must be, ultimately, it's about making great products your consumers are going to love and enjoy and treasure. It must be a great pleasure for you, overseeing this whole organisation, to see that manifestation in the collection each time that rolls around.
Yeah, I believe that the first feeling you get when you see the collection as a whole is the quite clear consistency across the color palette, across the materials and fabrics used, across the overall feeling of the collection itself. And that's exactly the goal we want to achieve, and we did pursue. So wanted to end up with a collection that was the sum pieces that are strictly consistent one with the other. So instead of proposing something that is very much linked to product categories, so suits on one hand, sweaters on the other hand, trousers in the backstage and so forth, we wanted to make sure that the whole collection was perceived as a genuine, credible and consistent expression of our Italian lifestyle interpretation. So I believe that it's a goal that we have already achieved, and according to the comments we are collecting, I believe that we already made it.
That was Stefano Canali, the CEO of the Canali Group, and you can find out more about the business and how it's marking its 90th anniversary by heading to canali.com. You are listening to The Entrepreneurs, and I'm nothing short of delighted to say I'm joined in the studio now by Monocle's fashion director, Natalie Theodosi. Natalie, we miraculously managed to grab your attention just before you jetted off for all the spring-summer shows. It's always great, of course, to have you on the show.
Thank you. Always
good to have
a
you
pleasure.
With us. It's interesting, actually, just hearing from Stefano. I think it's really interesting when brands have to navigate this challenge, I guess, of, adapting, innovating, moving with the times, but being very respectful of heritage. And I don't know, I really sense from my conversation with him how important it was to respect this sort of the family traditions, if you like. I know you've obviously met him and talked to him before. Well, it is a family business, right? So it's unsurprising that he underscores those values.
No, absolutely. And I think it's also something very Italian, that they really value family, tradition, and passing the business from one generation to the next. It's become harder and harder, and a lot of these family-owned businesses are selling majority stakes to the big conglomerates, but Canali is one of the few that have been keeping it in the family. And I'm sure you got a similar sense when I spoke to him, and it was a little bit earlier, like after the pandemic, when everyone was changing their ways and evolving. he really spoke about the benefits of slow evolution. They didn't want to all of a sudden go from making suits to making tracksuits and sportswear, but they understood that something had to change. So the designs were evolving slowly, and they've been putting more and more effort into making sure that sustainability is top of their agenda, the fabrics they use, the quality of their factories. And I think that sets them apart even further.
And it's interesting, I suppose, if there are entrepreneurs' values or Monocle values that we continue to espouse on this program, it is about that a little bit of slowness and not rushing, not being too reactive. It doesn't mean to say you're not open to new ideas, but sticking to your principles and actually the kind of customers and the relationships with customers you can build up. If you're not constantly changing, maybe it's worth, I think, clever brands that are well marshalled by their leadership understand there's perhaps even more to be gained from sticking to your principles than changing all the time. I don't know if that's fair.
No, and I mean, they are celebrating 90 years this year, and I think they are in it for the long term, and they're playing a long game, so that's why they don't want to just change the creative, change all their campaigns, their target customer from one day to the next, maybe have quick success for a few years and have to restart all over again, which is what has been happening in many of the big fashion houses where creative directors have been coming and going. And I think, we've been speaking about sustainability. That's in business a much more sustainable way to run a fashion brand.
Definitely. Well, it's interesting. Stefano and I talked a little bit about the new collections, though, because notwithstanding all of that rich history, it is always exciting to see what else is new and what's coming. And whilst you're here, Natalie, let's get some, I was going to say reflections, but I guess it's to look ahead. Expectations, maybe. Spring, summer 25, we're starting to see the direction of travel. What have you got planned? What are you most excited? What and where perhaps are you most excited to be going? Tell me how you're marking your card ahead of this next kind of reveal of all the new collections and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's a very busy month. I think the fashion crowd manages just about to stay a little bit calmer and quieter in August, but now it's full steam ahead. We are sort of starting our coverage in Europe, so with the London shows next week, but fashion weeks have already started. It's quite interesting that right now Ukraine Fashion Week has restarted for the first time since the war. We've had some great interviews, I think, on Monocle Radio. And it's then moving on to Amsterdam, New York, and London, Milan, Paris. I will be joining the tour from London, and we're expecting a lot of interesting things. In the case of London, it's a time where the young independent designers are having a little bit of trouble keeping up, given the state of the economy. But they're staying strong. There's still going to be an interesting effort, and I'm looking forward to going and seeing some of the shows and supporting them. And then in Milan and Paris, I think there's the bigger, more established shows where it's really large-scale spectacles, but it will be interesting to see. There's a lot of conversations around the exits of a lot of creative directors. Everyone wants to see what's going to happen at Chanel, at Givenchy. The Valentino will look completely different this season. So there's a lot of industry change, which will change what we see on the catwalk and what the designers propose we wear, but also behind the scenes, how these businesses are run.
Now, I know it's very hard to generalize, but to the point you made earlier about sort of slower, more managed evolution, is there a playbook? If you have a new creative director, obviously people want to make a splash. They want to underscore their creative credentials, right? Which is of course understandable. How do, especially the big players, how do they, or how should they try and best marshal that process? Because you don't want to just throw away all of this hard-won market position and client sort of perception, but at the same time you do need to signal change. Is there a best or better way of doing it in your view?
I think what was happening was exactly what you said. Brands and new creative directors coming in and wanting to make a splash, so you would see logo change, the aesthetic change completely, the color schemes, and 3 years later, that creative director might have gotten sick of the pressures of the job and left, and you have to do it all over again. So what the brands are doing now, which is better, and I think much healthier, in most cases they're doing it at least, is that they're putting the brand before the creative director. So the creative director has to almost follow a brief that respects brand codes, the heritage, and that's a lot more important than his personal vision. I think in the past there was this kind of idea of the designer genius who can do whatever he wants or she wants, get away with everything, but it is starting to change. There's a lot more at stake. These businesses are global now, a lot more money at stake, so that's how they've changed the way they're managing it. And I think that's also why they've been taking a lot more time to make these hires, to find the right people who will hopefully stay for a lot more than a 3-year contract.
And before people start writing in to complain, they still have their genius, right? They just need to keep it within a couple of guardrails. And so arguably that's a greater challenge to try and live up to, I would say.
Absolutely. You can still be a genius. You just need to behave yourself a little bit better in the industry at the moment.
In every manner of speaking. Well, just briefly, in terms of new appointments, I don't know, were there any new appointments to some of the main houses where you particularly thought, this is a great hire, I can't wait to see what he or she does with their debut collection? Any particular ones as you're on the road you're going to be most looking forward to? Hard to choose, but...
I think I'm very curious to see what will happen with Valentino. I was a big fan of Pierpaolo Piccioli and what he was doing, but Alessandro Michele is such a beloved designer in the industry and has a big vision, a lot of interesting references, and loves to take a brand's heritage and really rework it. So that will be interesting. And one that is already kind of in the works is what Simone Bellotti, a former Gucci designer, is doing at Bali. And it was more of a quiet hire, not as much buzz around it, but I think he became one of the most exciting names in Milan and again has found that really fine balance of getting a brand's codes and its Swiss character and making it feel really modern and relevant. So I'm looking forward to going back and seeing his new collection.
Well, Natalie, thanks so much for joining us on the show. And of course, we look forward to hearing from you as you're crisscrossing Europe for the shows. Our listeners will be able to hear more from you all across the schedule here on Monocle Radio. And that's all for this episode of The Entrepreneurs. We'll be back at the same time next week. Do look out for Eureka, available every Friday. The programme was produced by Laura Kramer, with audio editing by Lily Austin. Listen again and find out more about the show at monocle.com, or follow us and catch up with the archive wherever you get your podcasts. If you want to get in touch with the team, email Laura on lrk@monocle.com. I'm Tom Edwards. Goodbye, and thanks for listening to The Entrepreneurs.
"2024 is a pivotal year for global politics. Meanwhile, conflict, climate change, and AI dominate the headlines. What do these global stories mean for you? The Financial Times offers fearless thinking in defining moments. Its trusted journalists deliver impartial analysis on the world's biggest news events, helping you to form your own bold opinions. Start reading the Financial Times at ft.com.